Good morning. I am live right here in my office, coming to you totally and completely exhausted from all of the live streaming that's been going on, first of all. And second of all, my head is just spinning from all of the content and all of the videos. And so when this happens in a community and you find yourself super inundated with whatever it is, whatever question you have, and whatever all this shit, your primary assumption is the other people in this community have this too. Good morning, Teo. I'm going to drop the link in case anybody, Teo or anybody, wants to join me at some point. Um, but I have quite a lot of thoughts. Primarily, one of my thoughts is that immediately after I said that I was really going to take a break from this so that I could look at my data and do all the things I said I was going to do, write my dissertation. PVK comes onto my stream and he's like, "Oh, you're a streamer." And then he publishes this document like, "Oh, look at all these people who are streamers. You, Claire, are a streamer." And then he says this. It's so there's these. I'm not pointing this out to troll PVK, even though I feel like I would be an excellent troll of PVK. So sign me up. Thinking theoretically about how this is building layers of reflexivity. I'm seeing myself in the stream. I'm seeing myself in this awkward streaming mirror thing that's happening. I'm seeing myself as other people see me through the stream, and then as they talk through other streams, layers and layers and layers of reflexivity that you don't get in everyday life. Good morning, ups, or afternoon, I suppose it could be. So I'm thinking about layers of reflexivity here. And so Paul was saying the other day, talking about how the internet is a transcendent space. And I've been thinking, and one of the examples he used was this classic example he continues to use if somebody's like if, for example, Freddie in the Freddie and Paul show, talking to his mother through the screen. And so I've been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about the internet as a not transcendent but sacred space in the sort of the sociological sense of the Durkheimian sense of sacred. Thinking about how it's sort of set aside from everyday life, but increasingly, of course, over the last 20 years, the internet itself, or our digital technology, has not necessarily become sacred. It's actually sort of desacralized itself. It sort of had this cheapening, like this actual mass cheapening of maybe what once was sacred, meaning set aside, set apart, different from the everyday, and it's become what Durkheim would call profane, part of the everyday life. But still, my image in the screen has this afternoon, excellent. My image in the space has maybe this sacred or set aside policy, or not policy, what's the word? My brain's not going to get words today. I don't know, this sort of sacred quality. So the point being, okay, so reflexively, this is important because not only is my image directly projected, as I said, I'm seeing myself being seen, and it's this sort of multiplied reflexivity in the space that not only transcends, so I guess there's the word transcendent, it's not only present in the moment of interaction, it transcends time. So that's something I've been thinking about, is how we could get to this idea of transcendence in the online world, or what does it mean to transcend the present moment. And so when I say transcend here, we do transcend the boundaries of time online because, well, we're crossing time zones. But there's also this echo, because so I'm thinking about also this sort of this echo that's existing in the online space as things are going far, far, far beyond the original place and time in which they take place. And these sorts of, like, if we do communal live streams with other people, um, we have this pre-recorded situation, right? So you have an interaction with people that's recorded, and you're sort of in that zone, but then at another point in time that's released and it happens, it's like it happens again. Good morning, McMo. How are you doing? Um, so there's reflexivity, there's this transcendence of time and place, and then there's also this sort of cyclical quality of returning to the past into the future, and this projection of the past into the future. And that's not something that we talk about a lot. We talk about intention. We talk about how do people form intentions. We talk about intention existing beyond sort of the like whether people have agency. This is a question of agency. Whether people have agency and can form agentic intentions, but also how this is something that's happening socially and well beyond us. So the internet, I think, really adds this dimension of what's outside of our control because we ourselves are putting events into the future, and just sort of complicating things. I don't know if any of that makes any sense because as I say it, it doesn't really make sense to me, but that's sort of something that I'm thinking about is sort of reflexivity in the present and the future. Good morning, Mark Parker. You're up early for West Coasters. Okay, but then totally switching topics here. PVK said something just wildly provocative this morning. There's this idea of transparency, McMo. That came up on Chad's stream this morning, which I only saw a middle 20 minutes of. I feel like I got to sort of disclaim what I've seen, what I haven't. But transparency versus transcendence. Transparency being, true transparency is transcendent of boundaries, transparent of identity, transparent of self, transcendent of those things. I don't really know what McMo means here, but that would be really interesting to think about. But Chad was talking about transparency and authenticity, and I don't know, Chad had a really good stream this morning. But PVK's stream, he was talking about how do we have these people who are crossing these boundaries of people crossing these boundaries, and he was talking about religious boundaries. Again, only saw 20 minutes. I have a 20-minute attention span. I don't understand these 2-hour streams. I don't know what people are doing. I love everybody who does that. That wasn't a critique. It was just sort of like how do you people sit this still for so long in a little tiny square? I don't get it. Set in love, not a critique. So I pulled this book from my shelf, The New Faithful. A friend of mine told me to read this a couple months ago, and it's older. It's like 10, 20 years old. I don't even know. Colleen Carroll. The New Faithful, 2002. Okay, so she's doing this data collection probably in the year like 2000. So this is, again, the data is a quarter of a century old, but she's looking at this trend, and she's saying, and she's not even doing I don't really know what her method is, but it's listed as sociology. I'm a little critical of her method, but I haven't actually read the and I'm totally focused on what's happening right now. Colleen Carroll wrote this book, The New Orthodoxy, and she's not talking just about Orthodox Christianity. She's talking a lot about the traditional Latin Mass in this need for religion of not either the head or the heart necessarily, but the body, and how I just think that's such a story as people are turning from this. So we had the rise of evangelical Christianity through the late 90s. That was sort of tied to the decline of the main line, and now we have all of these people who don't fit into any box, and they all are kind of coming from the same place, and they're all very similar, and yet they're it seems like they're ending in so many different places. And there's all sorts of stories going on there. There's all sorts of things that are shaping that for individuals and for people of different denominations. And so, something I've really been thinking with ever since I started hanging out with Orthodox Christians is um, Peter Gilquist's work, Becoming Orthodox. And so he's talking actually about Orthodox Christianity, the forming of this, I think it's Antiochian sort of. It's the Ortho Bros, right? It's people in the United States becoming Orthodox at huge, fast rates. And when he's talking about the trend here, the thing here, authenticity, looking for that truth. And one way to find truth for these people, they started out in house churches, which so many people here have, it seems like, done the house church thing. I would love to hear more about that. Um, so, starting out in house churches, looking for that real early Christian tradition, and then realizing, hey, yo, I didn't know this, but you can still be Orthodox. So there's that strain of things, and then there's also this strain of things of looking for that authenticity and going to a more traditional Latin mass, saying that like Vatican II really kind of screwed things up for people. It became too simple, too accessible, and we need these other things to help us. You tell me, feel closer to God. Feel, not just think, not just know this religious stuff that happens. This everybody's reading Eliade now. That's cool. He's got this really cool thing about witnessing the transcendent, and he talks about like emerald, shimmery things. I don't know. Very interesting. When you get to that part, tell me. The numinous. Wait, is that Eliade? Should we look this up? Is that boring to watch me look things up on my computer? Eliade, numinous. Looking it up. Ooh, Wikipedia defines the numinous as arousing spiritual or religious emotion, mysterious or awe-inspiring. I think that emotion of awe, very important here. Rudolf Otto. Oh man, I'm quoting Rudolf Otto and saying it's Iliada. Why is that? There is an article on it. Otto was influential to Carl Jung, Eliade, and some other people. Okay, so maybe I should join people in reading Eliade. I don't know. Okay, so this is the part of live streaming where I'm just talking to myself. And you can hear the things that go on in my head, and it's a little bit wild. But does anybody have any thoughts? Does anyone want to join me? Is this the same as Discord? Is this different? That's another question that someone might ask me someday, and I want to be prepared to answer it. Because I certainly have a lot of things to say. And I will say them right now. Those things are, there's so much content. How does anybody consume it? How do people know it? People hold it in their heads? Do I have some kind of like, do people have, I just really wonder, like there's interesting work on like cognitive structures that help people like sort things. Who am I thinking of? The guy who wrote the book on time. What's his name? He wrote lots of stuff. Starts with an F. I don't remember, but there's definitely work on like the cognitive structures in the brain that help people sort this information. And I feel like, and maybe this is because I've spent a lot of time on the other side of the aisle than some of you folks. Maybe this is because I've just sort of encountered different experiences that have sort of maybe shaped the cognitive structures in my brain. But my brain does not hold the same kind of information that's happening in these live streams. So there could be a specific sort of way of thinking, mode of being that shapes the way we hold information about what's happening in the online space versus things that we read. So we need like a neuroscience, we need some MRI studies. Maybe John Vervaeke. Does John Vervaeke talk about this? How we consume um, online content and then how we hold it and store it in our memories? Or is there such an abundance of content that in order to sort of streamline our ways through our thinking and talking and whatever, maybe because of this, uh, Luke, I didn't have the time to finish the homeroom. I had so many great ideas I had to live stream about. So it's sort of like a thing where you're forced to talk without listening. But I was thinking about the cognitive structures of the brain that help us to hold. Yeah, there's distributed cognition, but that means, 4E cognition. I've got a book on it. We'll break it out. It's a huge volume. But okay, so as we're thinking about 4E cognition, distributed cognition, yeah, that's one part of it. That means I put the stuff that's in my brain into the environment. Oh, that's extended cognition. Distributed cognition would be forced to talk without listening. Yes, I'm forced to talk without listening because there's so much content. So you have to pick and choose, or you have to curate your content, or you have to, okay, so McMo's saying distributed cognition, well, it's stuff held relationally. Sure, but how could you possibly know everyone? You're building your hierarchy. So there's tools in the environment, and one of them is the other people. So that's distributed cognition, but in a way, it's also extended cognition. And then there's these other modes of thinking and other cognitive tools that we have to hold the information. But there has to be, because of the sheer abundance of people and the new ways that we're getting to know people, there have got to be structures in the brain and in the body that you can somehow train up to. I don't really know. So yeah, 4E cognition would be a good way to go about this. Thinking about the things that actually make this stuff possible, because you need the digital technology, like you need the actual platforms and the physical side of things, but 4E plus 2E, oh my goodness, yes. I've been working on Ups needs to come here and educate me about the extra E's, because I was reading this paper, because you have the extended cognition, you have the I wish I had that book. But there is a paper. Different parts of the video will be salient for different people, so there's a salience thing. Of course I don't have branding, Grim. Do you think I just automatically learned how to make StreamYard work? If I was really on it, I would have figured out how to clip PBK's video, pretended that I watched the whole sort of thing, because if you watch a clip, it's like, I always feel, here's the feeling I have in this space. I'll share it. I feel like I am a freshman philosophy student headed to this class where everybody has both done the reading and does all the talking. And sometimes I'm sitting in the class and I realize nobody's actually read the book. And then sometimes, hi Mandy, sometimes I'm sitting in the class and thinking, holy shit, everybody read the book today except me. And so there's this sort of weird way that knowledge happens in this space, where it's like everybody kind of has this shared body of knowledge. And then also at the same time, this is a unique problem to someone who's trying to, okay, so that's true. I am, I guess if you know, like, just like a tiny little segment of things. Chad, how are you doing? There's like, so I guess it's like, thank you, Chad. Thank you. Okay, so my problem then might be that I am trying to, I'm going to share the link again in case somebody else has something to say here. Clip it if she says something good. I'm going to homeroom. Okay. Thank you, Griswold Grimm. I guess if you're Griswold Grimm and can have people just clip things for you, then like maybe Oh, yes, yes, thank you, ups. Embodied, embedded, inactive, extended, and then emotional, okay. And I haven't heard of the last one, accepted. But, okay, so, like, my question about emotional cognition, just seeing this would be, isn't all cognition emotional? Um, it's kind of a puzzle for me. But you read one of those articles and it blows your mind and it takes you a really long time to get through. And Chad is here. Oh my goodness. Hey Chad,
Hey there.
are you well?
Oh, am I well? Oh yeah, I'm well. Yeah. I'm just on the job site, taking a little break. How are you?
I saw your video this morning. I actually saw
Sweet.
part of your video this morning. I thought you just had some really good insights and advice. Like, Mo,
Good
Excellent.
morning.
Good morning, beautiful McMosa.
how
Oh,
are
I
and
ha-
look, Thompson, son of a biscuit.
I had something to
you?
get done at work, but it required me reading and comprehending legal jargon, and so I was like, "Oh no, you know what? That's an after lunch activity. I'm gonna hang with the homies."
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm so happy to see Luke Thompson too. I haven't seen him in like a week, but I did text him this week.
I was about to text him this morning, but I decided a prayer would suffice,
Oh,
and I'm
all
not
things
bragging.
are sweet. All things are nice. What are you mouthing, Clara?
Um, I I didn't know whether to say wild or whoa or and then part of my brain was sort of forming this question, how can I sort of take this and ask McMo what he prayed for Luke about without being weird? But you know what? I'm just gonna straight up ask McMo because that's that's where we're at.
Frankly, Claire, I'm offended because that is between me and God, and I don't even want to tell Luke what I prayed about. So, how about that?
Wow.
I
That
love
serves me
it.
right. That serves me right. Oh, okay. PBK's here. And I've shared publicly many times that clergy scare the shit out of me, but I'm gonna go ahead and let PBK in anyway, because that's the spirit of the space.
Well, I
Also,
Not
did.
PBK. Oh, look at this
I was
guy.
so fired up from PBK's homeroom that I almost started streaming this morning. That
I
is,
haven't seen it yet. Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it, please.
it's
I'm just
most
kidding. I
of
mean, you can
most of
spoil it.
my favorite things. Well, it's just Paul. I mean, it's basically on Paul Kingsnorth's talk
Yeah.
against Christian civilization, which is drums I've been beating since the beginning of the corner. All
My favorite
institutions
part of
are
that
inherently
video,
demonic.
that my favorite part of that video was the 30 minutes of crowd noise before at the beginning of it. I do love
So,
that kind of thing.
okay, since we're making requests for branding and stuff, I want to make a request that anybody out there who has the time and patience and wherewithal put together a PVK Classics Hall of Fame bangers playlist and share it publicly, and also make it so that people can add to it. And then PVK can share that on his channel, or PVK can start the playlist himself, and then we can add to it.
So maybe
Isn't it
begin that.
just yeah, it's just a list of my conversations with PBK. I have that on my channel.
Yeah,
Oh,
and it's
okay.
followed by a list of every time PVK posts a video of Luke on Grail Country. Oh wait,
Oh,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Claire, I did before we get too far away. I did want to offer a potential solution to your quandary of how do you watch everything.
Thank
Um, which is
you don't.
you don't watch everything. You watch the people you watch very closely because
Hmm.
I don't need to watch every video from Chad to hear about something horrible or great that's happened in Chad's life. And also I
Right.
could just call him. But same thing with Luke. Like I need to know Luke to a certain extent. And then the stuff that he's interested in, like this Paul Kingsnorth thing, case by case basis, I can just be like, okay, this is something I'm interested in, or it's something I'm not. Now, for me, the thing that's interesting about that is what is making something interesting to me versus what is not. And that is the kind of Vervaeke salience landscape. And so this is why Grimm has Reapers of the salience landscape, um, because everyone is paying attention to slightly different um, things. And so we bring the parts that are salient to each other in clips or in branding or in playlists or in all of that stuff, and then we share. Where you can be like
That's
hunters
the
and
dream
gatherers.
catcher. That's the dream capture of optimal grip.
Yeah. So yeah, you focus on the people, but you've got a specific difficulty because what your the task you've given yourself is to kind of come to some sort of comprehensive understanding of the goings on here. And the only way to do that is to get to know the people, because nobody knows, not a single person knows everything that goes on here. But you can only really get to know everything by knowing the people.
It's as if quantitative analysis is a dead end.
Well,
Weird.
it's not a dead end. It's a tool that's being used beyond its purpose. This is Byung-Chul Han, right? Like, this is the difference between information and narrative or story. This is the difference between the types of things that make up a spreadsheet and the type of things that make up a life. And spreadsheets have their place. So, you know, if you're going to make a spreadsheet, make a good spreadsheet. But if you're trying to kind of understand a group of people, spreadsheets are going to be very hard to translate understanding a group of people, unless you're a sociopathic salesperson.
Well, you can never get to meaning. This is why I say the person is the nexus and locus of all meaning. It doesn't matter how much quantity you have. Nothing can tell you what it means. That's the is-ought thing.
And make sure your spreadsheet is written in the form of a poem.
And don't take any advice.
Yeah.
No, y'all are experts. I just feel so much more prepared to write my dissertation now.
No, you cannot use the word experts here.
Yeah, that's such an annoying thing to me when people are like, this is not a place for experts. Like the whole expert thing, I'm like, what is an expert?
Well, she's going to talk to Mark Lefevre.
Oh, so expert. Okay.
Mark's going to straighten her all out.
Yeah.
He's going to navigate the patterns around what it means to be an expert, be the greatest expert with the largest patterns and the best navigation tools of all time. It's going to be magnificent.
Why are you talking like that?
Because somehow I equate Mark Lefevre's character with the Trump character that we all see. So somehow my salience landscape has conflated them comically. And I hate that you made me had to explain that joke, even though you knew exactly what I was doing.
Do you think it's a character?
No, I think Trump is a character. I think he's playing a character at times. Sometimes I think Lefevre is playing a character or tries to, but he's just a really bad actor.
I think Trump has probably LARPed his way into his being the character. He's like that comedian. Who's the comedian that's just like, hey, with the leather jacket and what the hell?
Oh, Andrew Dice Clay?
Yeah, Dice Clay, where he just like he became the guy he was pretending to be.
Or like when Brian Warner transformed into Marilyn Manson.
There you go. That's and he removed the rib.
Clara, are you beginning to understand the hazard that you have wandered into?
Oh. Chad, here's an important question. Are Middle Kids better than all the other bands you like? What are the names?
Oh, Bill Murray or Sleep Token?
Yeah.
I've only listened to a couple of Middle Kids songs, but if Middle Kids tickles your fancy, then I'm happy for you.
Thank you. McMo probably doesn't think they're good. I bet Christian Baxter would think they're good, though.
I do think they're good.
Clara, have we answered anything? I don't really like distributed cognition, really. I don't think it's possible. Because I think it's all filtered through the personal. Like and memory. Like what you said. I've been talking about memory forever. Rupert Sheldrake needs to come in this corner. Because memory is the purveyor of reason. Memory sets the table for reason. And I don't think most people think about how memory works very much. And in order to
think it's more like inspirational. It's more like inspirational cognition.
There you go. That's better.
You got everybody colonizing your poor live stream here, Clara. I feel for you.
I tried to get back.
I don't.
This
Dude, Clara loves this. Are you kidding me right now? She's eating this up, and we're happy to be here. So stop trying to spoil a party, Papa PBK.
Even Chad has a donut.
I know, it's awesome.
I don't know if disagreeing with distributed cognition is properly understanding what people mean by that. If I, I think that here I tend to use it in the parlato way of like, there's a lot of smart people here. They're all kind of filtering through current events and theological topics, and I need those other voices so that my cognition is not, siloed, is one way to think of it. But I
like that.
I think that you can't disagree with distributed cognition in Vervaeke's sense, because it's just kind of like a fact. Like your cognition, the way that you think about things is not inside of your head, right? It's the 4 E's. It's embodied, it's interpret, like all the 4 E's or whatever. So in that sense, 4E cognition, 4E cogsi, the classic. Luke, where have you been, bro?
I don't know.
The other thing is, though, is you said that like your understanding of the distributed cognition has a lot to do with the intelligent folks that you see around here. But I think good bad examples also contribute to the distributed cognition. So if you have really stupid ideas or bad ideas like I have, you can learn a lot from me in that way.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Chad, the most self-effacing, lovable pillar of the corner.
No, dude, I'm just the most humble.
Yeah.
That's what McMoses said. If that makes it into your paper that I actually believe that I'm humble, we're not friends anymore.
Write it down. Write it down right now.
I want to be friends, Chad, because I favor relationality more than the other shit. And because of my friendship, I am going to ask you about the eating, but also separately, how should I prepare for this conversation with Mark? How do you even say his name? I mean,
lots of meditation. Get ready to get told you're stupid.
Don't prepare. There's no preparation.
Yeah, don't prepare.
Necessary.
I don't feel like there's any amount of things that you could know about the world that would make Mark not think you're stupid. Am I getting the right read on this?
Here, let me tell you this. I think that you should approach it like a sociologist.
Yes.
No.
Just like try not to have any strings attached, which is all impossible. You have all your own biases, but stick to your questions. And Mark has his real shiny spots. Like I've had good conversations with him. I just happen to grow into a position where I don't really like him anymore. So I find it really difficult for me to I'm just trying to be honest.
I can't imagine you not liking anyone.
I find it difficult.
You don't know Chad well enough. You haven't been around the corner long enough. Chad's been leveling up in terms of his stability and ability to handle disagreeableness, but you haven't been around for Chad to quit the corner yet.
Oh yeah, I hope that.
I've been here.
Chad and I are both very sensitive people, and Mark and Manuel are they're like, so if you look at Big Five, so I have to talk about this, like I'm actually first percentile politeness. So my agreeableness is like in the 30s or something, 33, I think. But that's because I have first percentile politeness coupled with 88th percentile compassion. So like I'm a super weirdo. And so like you basically take away my compassion and you have Mark and Manuel.
So they lack compassion.
I think that they lack empathy because it can be weaponized by the malevolent feminine. Yes.
Are they part of this little corner of the internet? Answer with your gut.
Of course.
Yeah. Yes.
Of course they are. It'd be ridiculous to say that they aren't.
I am
unless they say they aren't.
I let them self-identify.
I was about to say, I am sensitive to self-identification as McWoke, and they do not identify as part of TLC. So they are not a part of TLC. They are part of the Peterson sphere.
They can't escape.
Yeah. I identify with Jordan Daniel Wood's Christologic, which is the identity of identity and non-identity. So they are not parenthesis in the corner.
I see.
Okay, I'm going to give you a flow diagram here real quick. Okay, so you have the. I discovered this morning. You actually have. It's called the Dreer sphere. That's kind of where this is all starting at, because PBK finds Jordan Peterson through Rod Dreer. So it goes from Dreer to Peterson and then to the distributed cognition throughout, and then but the 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 corner is couched in the in the Dreer Rogan sphere. Okay, that's where it's kind of really all kind of around there. But inside of there, you have TLC, and then you have the Peterson sphere, which is inside the TLC. Booyah, bitch!
Wait, is that for real? Would you consider us to be in the Rokan sphere currently?
Oh
In the
yeah,
map of things?
I imagine he's gonna pop
I
on
think.
here anytime.
Well, I just
This-
go. I just do it kind of like emergent emanation flow chart.
Well, one of these days when I upload my StreamYard membership, he can definitely join.
Yeah, I think we do
I don't
need to
want
be
him to
careful about-
join officially.
I think
Sorry.
we do need to be careful about like just speaking about people who aren't here. It's kind of not polite to do that. But then the other thing I will say is I think that Neil actually nailed this on Mark Parker's stream last night, which I'm not going to say it in the same words, but what did he say? We're like the misfits of the misfits around here. But the kind of scientific way to put that is that there is a high degree of variability at the tail end of the bell curve. And I think that there are a lot of bell curves and there are a lot of tail ends of bell curves. And so we're really dealing with, to bring back Vervaeke, a combinatorial explosiveness of the high degree of variability at the bell curve. And so one of those bell curves is just like IQ, G, capital G, of which Mark and Manuel are both leagues ahead of me in. And so it can be very intimidating to interact with them because they are very smart and they have thought about a lot of things very deeply. And so they can often be confident and certain about things that are because they've thought so long about them and they've got very long kind of logic chains that seem obvious to them. So I think that there is a lot of miscommunication that can happen between people who are more airy-fairy mentally and more kind of jump from thing to thing. You like recently Furry David has been saying that this is an autistic space. And I don't think that that's 100% true because I think there's a lot of ADHD as me and PVK and obviously Clara, who said you only have an attention span of 20 minutes earlier in this very stream.
Diagnosable.
Yeah, the only thing that makes you diagnosable is going to a quote unquote professional and wanting to be diagnosed. But like I prefer that, like I think that it's probably more accurate to say that there's a lot of neurodiversity here. And so with that neurodiversity comes a lot of, existential views, a lot of worldviews, a lot of ways of interacting with people. And so, yeah, not everybody's going to be your cup of tea and they don't need to be, but it works better when we're all kind of doing our best to live out the liberal, capital L liberal ideal of just getting along.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I love Mark and Manuel both. I've spent time with them both. I consider them friends, even though I'm from New Jersey, so I have weird taste in friends. So at the Connecticut estuary, a woman made an observation. I won't name her, but she is a presence in the corner. And she said, when men sort of chop each other down, they don't mean it.
Well, if you approach the world more, sorry.
But when women compliment each other, this is a woman who made the comment. She said they don't mean it either. So, so it's we love Mark and Manuel, we really do, and I continue to want to point people to Mark. Mark's a very smart guy. He's got tremendous insight. They've just got interesting personalities, and they tend to pop off sometimes in anger and attack. But hey, Chad's got that too. And but again, you haven't been here long. Chad is working on some of his impulsive behaviors in a very disciplined way. It's just the way people are. So, and actually, I much prefer a corner with some trolls in it. I haven't banned T Grog. I haven't banned Mark and Manuel. I'm not going to ban them ever and they can say what they want and they can leave if they want. And it's all fine, but you'll find the same kind of ambivalence when they talk about me. So I can't wait for you to talk to them.
Okay, riddle me this. Does the online space somehow make it easier for people who, what was the word? I don't even remember. Get really pissed off at each other to be in community with each other?
It depends what you mean by community.
There's 5,000 different definitions of community, but we all basically mean the same thing. To be in, I'll take community off the table. I'll say be in conversation with each other or ongoing conversation.
Once they stop talking about us and we stop talking about them, or at least talking to each other, then I guess community is broken. But you also have to consider Father Eric's role in this whole thing. He's another really important part of the corner.
How is Father Eric important?
So Father Eric, it's interesting because you always need to have an opposition. And so kind of what has happened is Jacob and Mark and Manuel often sort of become the loyal opposition or the rambunctious opposition. And Father Eric then becomes the chaplain of the opposition while I'm the chaplain of the mainstream.
Say more. What are the things that Father Eric is doing or you're doing to be the what is the role of the chaplain? This is the first time.
People must push back, especially men. They must push back. And so you need to have pushback. And so these guys are pushing back, and that's healthy for the overall ecosystem. And part of what has been true about this space is that it's always been a space in which pushback is welcome. And so the pushback that these guys give is welcome. But part of the way men push back is giving each other shit and getting angry and having a little spat. And now if we were in physical space, we might shove each other a little bit and then we go out for a drink or a coffee or something. So it's totally natural. But now you have to also understand that there are religious layers to this too. And Father Eric is a conservative Roman Catholic. Mm-hmm. And Mark, well, you'll have to ask Mark about his relationship to the Roman Catholic Church. And you probably didn't ask Jacob about his relationship to the Roman Catholic Church, which is deeply ironic on many levels. And Manuel, at least for a while, was going across the street to worship with an African church in the Netherlands. So, there always has to be a chaplain. And so Father Eric is sort of the chaplain to the opposition. And Father Eric's great. You won't find a negative, bad word in Father Eric's mouth. He's super smart. He's super committed. And so on Sunday nights, go to the Sunday night live stream that Father Eric does, and you'll find some of the loyal opposition. And it's awesome.
Do you ever join the loyal opposition, or are you just like...
Well, Sunday nights, the last thing I want to do Sunday night usually is climb onto a live stream because it's Sunday.
Yeah. Ooh, we just missed Chad.
I'm a preacher. Sundays are special. I don't know why. See, that's a Protestant Catholic difference. I don't know what Father Eric is doing all Sunday morning, but I know what I'm doing.
I know the look in your eye during Freddie and Paul shows, Paul, and Sunday afternoon is a time for the clergy to disappear into the divine darkness of God. And so it would be, I think, probably a sin for PBK to show his face Sunday night, because he's given, hopefully, pretty much 100% of his all to his sheep all morning. And it's kind of the high point of pastoral care. And obviously the sermon is important, but if you don't see that PBK is exhausted about, 1 out of every 3 Freddie and Paul shows, and I don't know what you're watching.
I've seen it. It's like a, dear God, get me out of here type of situation.
No, it's the face of somebody who's done good work. It's somebody who has exhausted himself to the glory of God.
PBK goes home and watches part of the Bachelor series with his daughter-in-law on Sunday afternoons, or Oak Island, or Skinwalker Ranch with his son. This is what PBK watches, naughty TV on Sunday afternoons. That's what PBK does.
So when I worked for the mega church, every Sunday afternoon, basically, I would sit out on my porch, and this is when I addicted myself to cigarettes. But every Sunday afternoon after church, I would basically collapse, and I would just we were in like a garage studio apartment, me and my wife, and so I would just sit in a lawn chair for like all of Sunday afternoon, drinking whiskey by myself, just listening to music, listening to podcasts. It was like, oh my gosh, I remember. I haven't been that exhausted in a long time, but probably for the better.
Okay, so I get it. It's a lot to be on stage, to be talking to the flock, shepherding your shepherd stuff. What is Chad saying here? Models versus story.
I think he's putting his finger on a maybe difference of focus or a difference of attention and what's important there. I mean, there's a lot of ways. Once you've got two camps, there's an infinite way of distinguishing them, and so there are a lot of vectors in which the two kind of you've got Father Eric versus PBK, the showdown for the century. But yeah, so one possible vector of disagreement would be what's more important. Like, is it more important to kind of have an accurate model of reality, we'll say, or is it more important to focus on the way people's stories say something about who they are and God's work in their life? And it's not to say either that, like, PBK never dabbles in models. A lot of what he does on his channel is dabbling with models and playing with them and working them out. Nor is Father Eric, like, think that stories are worthless. He often will sit for hours and listen to someone's story on a live stream. And so, yeah, it's just kind of but I think that kind of preference for story versus model is a good way of kind of thinking about a lot of the differences, I guess. As I speak for Chad, who, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad.
He says models are like presumption about character. Story is how things play out in relationships. So that made sense in the context of what you were saying. But while I have you two here, can I ask a little bit, because each of you comes from this sort of pastoral zone, dare I say it. And so I'm wondering, like, okay, so what is it on the online space? Like, what is it in the online space to be doing this kind of pastoral, whatever it is you do?
I'm not doing any of that here.
You say you're not, but obviously I'm going to have to dig some more.
Well, you said something interesting.
Called you a liar.
Yeah.
Not?
I am. That's one of the least of my problems right now. But no. I heard something you said in Mark Parker's stream last night, and actually this helps demonstrate what I was talking about earlier about keeping an eye on the whole corner versus just watching the people very closely. Is you said somebody was like a pastor, and then the way you described it was almost like the lowest Protestant way to describe what a pastor is. You said like everybody in TLC, or not everybody, but so many people kind of have appear pastoral to you. And I think the qualification you used was just like knew a lot about the Bible or something.
No. No, I like, okay, like there's so many people with either formal training, people who there is a type, okay? And if you've got some formal training and you're the type, I don't care if you have a pastoral role. You've got the vibe.
Well, this is what I'm saying. The vibe, though, is highly. When I think about the vibe, now that I'm post vibe, maybe in some ways, there is a sense of, like, when I think pastoral, I honestly think of the guy PBK talked with yesterday, who's trying to start the online church. That to me is a very kind of, that's closer to pastoral. What you might be putting your finger on is the type of serious care for one another that's displayed. And when someone is in pain, the amount of people in this space that, instead of withering back, approach that person. But this isn't necessarily a ministerial thing. This could just as easily be explained as an AA thing, right? Like that there's a lot of hurt people here. And so those hurt people tend to find hurt people and try to help them because we know what it's like. And the specific types of hurt are probably a pretty good Venn diagram in this space as well, having to deal with church hurt, the meaning crisis, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, I think that you're onto something, but like, and also this is a good time to correct PVK's brief description of me in the video yesterday too, or the stream yesterday, day before, which is I was not technically a pastor or in a pastoral. Oh, speak of the devil. Hey, Corey. Speak of the angel. I wasn't actually in a pastoral role. They were asking me to do pastoral things in that role, but in terms of paycheck and accountability, or titles, I was just the director of media and production. So I had small groups and teams and participated in high school ministry and stuff like that. So I have some of those toolkits, and there was a lot of people who would have loved for me to have followed through with those in some sort of vocational ministry. But yeah, that's and again, that was like 12 years ago now, so a long time ago.
Oh, I didn't know it was that long ago.
Yeah, well, not 12. I guess no, it wasn't 12. I did the math wrong. It's like 8 years now.
That's still a long time.
Yeah, it's a whole different life.
Pastoral care is caring for people with authority, and because both of those components are in it, and that it's a little bit distinct from what McMo was talking about, which is just sort of the communion of the saints, where people care for one another. So clergy care for people with a degree of authority, and it's a spiritual authority. So you can think analogous to, let's say, a doctor's care. That is also care with authority, but in a different silo, or a therapist's care. So it's there is an element of, and that's why when Corey had titled his, and that was completely without me, when he titled his thing Open Office Hours, that both has sort of an academic nuance, because academics have office hours, but also clergy have office hours. You don't drop into your therapist's office. You always have to make an appointment. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of nuance in terms of these. The medical profession is downstream from the pastoral profession. The therapeutic profession is downstream from the pastoral. The academic is downstream from the pastoral. The pastoral is the root, and it's also the broadest.
I see what you're saying. Okay, so authority, though, when you're talking about authority, I guess my question is, there's legitimate authority. There's there's like this ordination process, and then there's also, it's like there's layers of it. Like whose authority?
Well, we live in an,
and from where? I think because one of the big things that I think is changing, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I think one of the things that's changing when it comes to the nature of authority in these different professions that Paul's talking about here is we're starting to see a sort of subjective and decentralized sense of it, where I don't have an inherent, in the way that maybe my grandparents would have thought that their domine pastor had an inherent authority from God bestowed upon them that they ought to listen to. Now authority is given by the individual to the person that they're seeking help from. Even when it comes to doctors, people are not just giving a doctor authority to prescribe in their life. They're shopping around, so to speak. So I share that question about authority. I think if I'm hearing you the right way, Clara.
Okay, but I'm really captivated. That makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate that. I'm captivated by what McMo said, which was the implication that people in TLC and the internet space are giving this care to each other, I guess, without authority, is that?
Well, I think that there's a sense in which the easiest definition of authority is that which you submit to, right? Like you've given authority to that thing. And so there's a weird way internally, if you are ever in ministry, where there's this, what you feel a lot of times is people giving you this authority. And either at that point, you either kind of understand it as like a divine right, you know, that like God has moved the paths of your life into a certain way that now you have authority over these people, and therefore like the responsibility for those people too. But the Christian, this is what made ministry. So one of the things that made ministry very mentally difficult for me, I guess, emotionally difficult, was that the call in terms of the ideal of authority is rather drastic for a Christian minister. The ideal is not, at least especially for Protestants, but the ideal is can be easily mixed up for like the idea, like the ideal of the good king. But the ideal shepherd or the ideal pastor has the ever, like, this is Tim Keller, like the both extremes of the spectrum of being loving and gentle, and being harsh, and not harsh, but strong and forceful. I can't remember Tim Keller's exact words, but there's this dichotomy. And then to confuse it all further, like, you look to Jesus, who is the height of humanity, and he descends to the depths of humanity. And so there's all of these kind of interesting, I think, ideas that go along with authority. But yeah, I think that still the simplest expression is just that which you submit to has authority in your life. But yeah, just some brain spaghetti for you. I don't know if it's helpful.
And submission is not acquiescence. I mean, what I would say is it's received with meekness, the implanted word. Submission is willing and voluntary.
And so
this is what people get wrong about authority. Authority is not just this institutional, impersonal thing.
Right, but that doesn't help if you're giving authority in your life to say evil or demons, right? Like, this is what makes uncomfortable if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out, because it's you've given your right eye authority over your body. Your right eye. Why do I think something's wrong with my right eye? Maybe I need to wear eye patch, lead me not to sin. But yeah, like even if it is personal, there's still this sense of, if you're giving authority to the flesh, the devil, the world, it's either a render unto Caesar's that which is Caesar's situation, or it's a no man can serve two masters situation. And, discerning between the two is very difficult outside of community.
The William Branch's comments about submission as American reject authority, it goes deep into the American principality, and it goes all the way back to the founding of the United States, which was a rejection of monarchical authority. And that then gets into this American definition of authority is that to which I submit to. And the difficulty is, if I am submitting that to which I submit, I then am the implicit authority. And I think this is part of the reason for the new attraction to orthodoxy, traditional Catholicism, various forms of Pentecostalism, political fanaticism, because there is a vacuum. If we have no authority in our life, we will find something to submit to. It is deep in what we are as people. And as McMo said, we don't necessarily always choose the best authorities to submit to, hence American culture.
I think the best way to think of this is always a family. It just simplifies it and it just makes these complicated things so much more simpler. And I think it's fractally true at every level. So like, I can ask my kids to submit to me. And in a sense, it's easier when they were younger, in my experience, because you have more control over them and they don't have individuation and autonomy. But when they're older, when they're late stage teenagers, you are the rightful authority they should be submitting to, but it doesn't work unless they want to. It just doesn't work. No matter how much you want them to, no matter how much it's right, no matter how much you tell them they should, it doesn't matter.
Well, late stage teenagers are also going through the developmental stage of differentiation,
Sure.
where you don't actually have true submission until it's actually voluntary submission. And so what they are doing is working through this process of learning to level up in terms of their agency within submission. And a lot of Christian maturity is about passing through those levels.
Yes, but that's ultimately that's what I mean by what I think Saint James means by receive with meekness the implanted word. That's what he's talking about. But it has to be voluntary.
Okay, but are people doing? I mean, is that the shape that this little corner of the internet is taking? Are people taking on this Christian wild culture and doing this submission to it? That sounds like obedience. That sounds like you need to have a. My partner accused me. I'll give you a real secular perspective. My partner accused me of falling into some cult shit, increasing cult type situations. And so when we talk about authority, that makes me think obedience. That makes me think, yeah, whatever I just said.
Well, there may come a time when you need to figure out if obedience is always a bad thing, or if you're, and I'm speaking here with you, because for me, it's obedience is certainly a trigger word for multiple reasons. But I think that the problem is with the American error of casting off authority. You'll notice that there, I don't think, if I remember the Constitution well, there isn't a lot of this person's an authority, we submit to this. I mean, even like it starts out with like, we hold these truths self-evident, that God created, all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with unalienable rights.
Is that the Constitution?
Whatever it is, Declaration of Independence, I don't remember.
No.
Which is to my point, like we don't really remember.
Yeah.
A lot of us, I think, don't really remember the problems that were being solved with every move of history, right? Sometimes we do, but I think that there's a sense in which the assumption of the American project was what we don't like is basically feeling like the only person the king has to answer to is God, and all the rest of us have to answer to the king, and the king is basically, we're not submitting to the same thing. We're not playing the same game, and so there, you can paint the American project as a rebellion, or you can paint it, I think, as a
Well, I'll jump in because I covered a lot of this in the videos I did in my first year.
People I think now that I've talked to who would maybe even think that's a bad idea, but but like, yeah. But when you start thinking about like religious authority, I certainly do think that starts to complicate things, but I don't think that it complicates things for the reasons people normally say. I don't think, I'm not like a, ooh, gross, like every small time pastor is Mark Driscoll in Waiting. It's more like, well, if I can go full McMo absurdism, I think that everybody is way worse than they think and we think. This is, I'm a believer in total depravity. So just as much as we have bad leaders, we have bad followers, and it's just sin and evil most of the way down. But there is a real sense, I think, when you're engaging in a space like this, you kind of have to determine for yourself, like, what am I getting tricked here? Am I, and so, but then you start talking about your conscience, and I don't know how you can wrestle with that if you're going to maintain the sociological unbiased nature of your studies, right?
Oh, I'm biased. I'll go ahead and say I'm biased.
Because the only once you get past Kierkegaard, the kind of options for dealing with existential angst, aka sin, aka despair, get very difficult to do. And so, yeah, like if your partner thinks you're headed towards a cult, you kind of have to decide, like, if you are headed towards a cult or if you're, still Jane Goodall.
Can't I be both? What was PVK going to say?
You have to understand, in order to understand the United States, you have to understand the Protestant Reformation, because what the Protestant Reformation does is dramatically tweaks our sense of authority. because the Protestant Reformation was a denial of apostolic succession and a turn towards the witness of the saints found in the book. And now Calvin, of course, says, well, found in the book basically found from the Holy Spirit through the book. Now that will lead to the Quakers and to the New England Transcendentalists, where authority then is found in the secret sacred self, where authority comes from within. That again is deeply in American culture. And even when Catholics and Orthodox come here, they then will begin to get pulled into that. And so where it's a little unfair to declare that the American Revolution, well, so first you have the disconnect from apostolic succession and the Roman Catholic hierarchy in the Protestant Reformation set up by Erasmus. But then because Luther couldn't adequately deal with pervasive interpretive pluralism, that everybody was reading the Bible by their own lights and coming up with different answers, then philosophically the West turns to the twin attempts at reason and empiricism. And so by the time you get to the American founding fathers, they are fundamentally deists who are doubling down on reason and empiricism beneath Christianity. And that then becomes the dominant ethos in the United States, and in many ways remains that to this day. And so I think, and so these deep religious differences that get exposed in the Protestant Reformation continue to govern, they continue to govern. And I would say that in many ways, the Orthodox and the Catholics, and even the other religion, Islam and other religions that come to America, they can't escape this deep cultural movement that the Protestant Reformation started. So you have to figure all that into authority. And so as McMo said, when Americans find authority in submission, that to which they submit to, and you recognize that this really is the authority of the individual and the secret sacred self, that is a product of the Protestant Reformation. But one could argue that this really has always been, because the church was fractured right away. You had Paul versus the Judaizers. You had the Marcions. You had the Donatists. You had the Trinitarian controversies and all the different ways that they tried to figure out who Jesus was and the nature of God. And so it gets into the fact that we've always got two poles, from the person out and from heaven to earth. And very much
very preachy now, Paul. Come on.
I'm not preaching. I'm not telling you which one to do, but this is. And then to understand Peugeot, see what is so radical about Peugeot is that Peugeot, being Orthodox, who should ostensibly double down on apostolic succession, reveals that even in Orthodoxy, it's not quite that simple, because Peugeot and Peterson basically follow the pragmatists, the existentialists, and the phenomenologists that start with the person and move outward, start with experience and move outward. So, I mean, you can make videos, you can make thousands of hours of videos about this and not exhaust it. Take it from me.
Yeah. Okay. So there's some historical foundations there for us. Corey and I were actually talking on email briefly, and I was telling him some things about my dissertation, and how I'm thinking about online community and also liminality, people who are between people who maybe once been religious or had a religious identity and then don't, and all these things. And PVK's got to run. Awesome. Thanks for joining.
Spotlight got too hot for him. He couldn't handle it.
I pushed back and he was like, well, actually, But did you have a final thought before you run, Paul?
I got to go to church because I got a live stream at 10.
Oh, that's right. What time is it now? Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. We'll be observing that soon. But Corey, I wanted to just invite you and see, hear what you're thinking about.
Well, the conversation that you and I started sparked a bunch of thoughts that are kind of, I think, connected to this, and a little bit connected to something Mark D. Parker brought up yesterday. He asked me about, like, if I thought I could control the narrative in doing church in a digital space.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I don't think we actually, even in the in-person church space, I don't think, speaking from like a pastor, staff, institutional position, I don't think we actually control the narrative for people nearly as much as we would like to think that we do. I mean, you have people for an hour once a week, and they spend the other 167 hours participating in and being inundated by other narratives that
When
shape
you
who
were
they
talking about this, and I was thinking the pastor has almost no authority in the narrative. It's really the church ladies you got to look out for. Ooh,
Yeah.
The group of,
Yeah, right. But even still, that fellowship on Sunday has very little as far as a percentage when it comes to controlling how people function in the world. There are so many other voices, and there are so many other communities that people see themselves as being a part of, that may, I think, likely shape the way that they think and function more strongly than what the church can do in its hour or two on a Sunday morning. Even though people might give lip service to, like, I'm a Christian and I go to this church and we believe these things, when you actually look at the day-to-day activities of a person's life, they're shaped by so many other stories and narratives as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that you and I started talking about over email was, how do the various communities that people participate in shape their identity? And the big question that I think our convergence, you and I now, is, as we venture into this digital space, how do digital communities, where, like, we're literally talking heads, right? We don't have a common practice or a common rhythm of life that we live together. We're not in physical proximity. There's no touch point. Sometimes we're just disembodied ideas with faces attached. What does that mean for how this sort of community will shape people's identity? And I don't even have the beginning of an answer, but I think it's a really interesting question.
Yeah. I'm interested, especially in your community, because you're doing an asynchronous approach. And so one of the things that I think about a lot is that, it is sort of these emotional rhythms that we have, not just our day-to-day rhythms, but the actual sort of rhythm of our conversation that is kind of giving us this, just a little bit of a broach into what we were talking about before e-cognition earlier. It helps us to get that. It helps us to get on the same page when we can at least see each other and hear each other. But if I'm just here, so the question, and I don't mean this in like a trolley way, I mean this like genuinely, and so I hope we can have a conversation about this question. Which is, like, what is the difference between, like, because, like, if your church is like putting out YouTubes, how is that different from just like entertainment? Like, why would I watch a YouTube, like, church service?
Yeah, let me see if I can intervene. I think the question is not whether or not it's entertainment, but why is it not allowed to be? like when I was in high school, I used to listen to sermons for fun. Like, I was entertained by sermons. I was entertained by the craft. I was entertained by, I'm a nerd. Yes. So, like, fine. But I also the problems of, I actually think that the church is in many ways ahead of the curve here. And when I say the church, I mean the Protestant priesthood of all believers, Communion of the Saints Church, in the sense that, well, a couple of things. One is, I recently saw a clip video of a bunch of big evangelical pastors all saying the phrase, circles are more important than lines. And what they mean by that is when you sit in a row in the church service, that's one type of interaction, and you're getting quote unquote fed, you know. But the real meat and potatoes is in a circle, in a small group setting. And so I think that there is an element to that which is just always true and has been true. There's also a slight kind of pushback, Corey, to not having as much narrative control as you want or something like that, because I do think that there is a sense in which that's true, but there's also a sense in which when people are coming to something that's called church or is associated with a church, many people are going to show that thing, that content, we'll say, with more respect and as having more authority in their lives, even though it's less time. And so they're all it's always both, right? So it's like if I used to be a window washer, and my language got more and more foul over the like 3 or 4 years that I washed windows because I was with a bunch of pirates, like it happened. And likewise, when I worked for the mega church, like I was, clean as a whistle, basically. And so, and I say that to say, yeah, the people you hang out with every day does matter, and how you hang out with them does matter. But then there's also a responsibility that gives people who are, straightforwardly trying to do something like church. And I'm not accusing Corey of not taking that lightly, because I assume most pastors take, like, that's one of the most pressing things on them, is that kind of authority and responsibility that's been given to them. The other thing I wanted to bring in was I recently watched the 2-part documentary on David Platt's downfall at McLean Bible Church in DC, which was a huge evangelical story. And it was very interesting to me. One, it's just a documentary, and so it's absolutely propagandistic in the way that the story is given. And if you work in film, if you've worked in narrative, there's easy ways to kind of see that. But it was interesting that the problems that the documentary put forth were basically, I think it's 2 or 3 big problems. One was there was a lack of transparency on money and funds. That was lied about and kind of misrepresented to the congregation. There was an issue with being a part of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is a denomination, but technically, legally, it's not quote unquote a denomination. And so there were, and this is right along with the CRC denominational issues that are fascinating to me. So once again, I am a nerd, but like this was all kind of, I think it might be required watching in terms of some of the, and then the other issue that David Platt had was he started introducing critical race theory and DEI initiatives. And so basically all 3 of those mistakes, we'll say, kind of ended up creating this situation that from the outside looking in seemed very a very difficult situation for him to be in, because he had lied, he had hidden things. And then he had, I think, genuinely wanted to wrestle with some of the worst parts of systemic racism, we'll say. But it was interesting to me that because it happened at this kind of conservative DC church, the political aspects of things were just as important to these people. The political, and when I say political, I mean the CRT, critical race. So my mic cut out there. The critical race theory stuff seemed to be just as important as the like denominational embezzlement stuff that happened to be just as important as the lying. And it was just interesting to me. Not only are those kind of like 3 obvious problems that could hurt any type of community, in the sense that, I mean, like, if you're dealing with money in a shady way, that's going to always impact them.
Uh-oh.
Oh no,
we lost Mi'kmaq.
But I feel like that was really a lot. And Corey, you've just been listening, but I feel like you're formulating some thoughts here.
Yeah, I'm. To be honest, I'm trying to connect where Mi'kmaq was going with where we had started, and I got a little bit lost with where we end up going. Sorry, Mi'kmaq. I'm like waiting for the conclusion where he brings it back in. What? Can we go back to your original question about asynchronous
Yeah. Let's start there, and then we'll bring McMo back in when he's back in.
Yeah. So in a lot of ways, I'm muddling my way through this, right? So my initial thought was create content. From that content, we'll begin to draw a group of listeners, and then from that group of listeners, we'll invite people who fit the mold of being interested in growing in their understanding and practice of Christianity, but uninterested for a variety of reasons in the sort of conventional institutional brick and mortar church. That we'll start meeting one-on-one and do a discipleship process. And for me, that takes one of two routes. One route is if the person, I think there are different kinds of people who want to learn in different ways. So some people want the didactic approach. In about 40 minutes, I'm going to sit down with a person who they want me to walk through preset material with them, like catechesis. Walk me through the basic beliefs. Let's explain them. Let's talk about them. I just finished up 9 months of working with a different person who she was way less open to catechesis, much more interested in a sort of spiritual client-centered coaching approach where I come to just conversationally help create awareness around where she wants to explore, help her define and set a path towards reaching the goals that she sets for herself spiritually. What do you want to learn about? How are you going to learn about those things? Who are you going to ask? Who can help you? Rather than me having the answers, it sort of assumes like, listen, you're the expert in your spiritual life. So how can I empower you to go on that journey you want to go on? So those are sort of the two streams. And then I imagined that from that second level of individuals, some of them will have the capacity and the desire to take what they're learning and practicing on their own and invite other people into it with them, and start small communities. In the church world, we talk about like planting a church or starting a house church, that kind of thing. But I try not to use that language too much because it maybe sounds like a little overwhelming. It's better just like, hey, do you want to gather a small community of people who will practice this thing that's benefiting your life with you, and then help coach those communities along. That was sort of the idea. So in one sense, it's like, it's asynchronous in the sense that the content piece is asynchronous, but then the other pieces of it would very much be in community, one-on-one, or in a small group, very synchronous rhythms of life and conversation together. So I sort of saw the content piece isn't the church. The videos that I make aren't the church. They're just a part of what how the church functions. I mean, in the tradition that I'm ordained in, we sort of follow the Belgic Confession's definition of the church, which is it's the preaching of the word, it's the administration of the sacraments, and the practice of church discipline. Discipline, I don't take that as like, beating people into submission, but it's more about submitting yourself to becoming more and more like Christ within a community. And those are the three markers. I see the content is only, plays into one piece of that really, which is sort of the gospel proclamation. I guess you could say it plays into the discipline discipleship piece, but because it's one-way communication, I don't think it really fits that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's just so much there, and I want to let McMo finish his thought from earlier, but
yes.
There's so much there in what you're saying, and it's at first it kind of reminded me of this kind of an emergent church that I visited. I spent some time there in South Bend, and really interesting congregation. And they actually kind of contrary to what McMo was talking about, circles and lines and stuff and pews in this church and some other churches like it that I've been to, but this church in particular formed its pews in a round, kind of sort of nodding to that kind of logic. And then the other thing that this church did that reminds me of what you're doing, and I'm just kind of making some connections here, is they had their sermons totally podcasted, and they were really kind of talking and inviting this kind of, maybe people who are liminals, kind of inviting the people to just attend church, not even by looking at a video or joining a live stream of the service, but actually just sort of listening asynchronously to a podcast. And that sort of strikes me as, yeah, that is an interesting model. But the difference, I guess, is that they were also inviting people into community groups, which is something that you are, it sounds like, and this is a question I have for you, building, like, so like it sounds like you are hand selecting people who have had this one-on-one. So it's like, come join this church if you, I don't know how to say this without, I don't mean this in an offensive way. So, so don't read me that way, I guess is what I'll say.
No.
So I'm just trying to be careful here in how I'm talking about this because I want to be very respectful. But I'm thinking
You're fine, Claire. We're friends. Go for it.
Oh, we're friends now. Wow. Okay, just like a hand-picked congregation. It's like I don't even know, like you're picking people for a football team or something. Like,
oh yeah, totally. So
Phlebas is recruiting me heavily already.
Phlebas is recruiting you for what?
To be a part of this online CRC mission effort.
Yeah. This is it's almost like I shouldn't have called it church, because if all you see is the content, you're like, well, that's not church, and I would agree. And if all you see is the one-on-one, you're kind of like, well, that's not church, and I agree. And if all you see is the small groups that form, it kind of depends on how they're doing their how they're practicing the faith together, whether or not we would, at least out of my tradition, call it church. I have a pretty obviously flexible and elastic sense of ecclesiology, but
the Protestant gift.
Yeah, right. So make it up as we go. So no one part of it is church. So I hear you. I don't hear you criticizing. I hear you sort of trying to sort through with me, what do we mean when we're calling it church, and which parts? And I'm thinking of the whole thing together. All three levels are sort of what make up church. Just like, to be honest, if you go to a Sunday morning service, you sit in the back, you listen to the sermon, you walk out and never speak to a soul, and there's no other engagement from you on that side, I think that you're not really a part of a church. I think you're just going to listen to a live podcast and see a concert that in many cases is wonderful and authentic, but there are better concerts out there. So I encourage you to look around. But that's, Sunday morning could also just be content for a person and them still not be part of a church. That's why I think that definition from the Belgic Confession is kind of just helpful, loose guidelines. Unless I'm participating in all three, I'm not a part of something.
Yeah. I also noted that you had a very Canadian version of church discipline.
Yeah. Well, yeah. While I do live in just outside Memphis, Tennessee, I am indeed Canadian. It's true.
He disappeared. That wasn't me.
All right. You kicked him out. You're like, not after that Canadian comment. Get out of here, McMo.
We like Canadians here. No, but Corey, I was really interested in what you were saying and sort of the layers, and together that's church. And having been to a lot of congregations and McMo's back. I hung out in the back pew. I mean, I hear what you're saying. It could be like, okay, but here's the counter argument. Let me throw out you a counter argument. When you're in that back pew, people have some sort of belief and idea and whatever about, well, actually the Holy Spirit's in this place. The Spirit's in the space. The Spirit is not only in me or you, but it's there when we gather in community and when we experience both each other in the space and when we experience. So there's the religious argument, and then the sociological argument. I'm just going to throw at you. There is so much data that suggests, there's some data that suggests that outcomes that people have when they go to church physically in person, and then we have this post-COVID, actually people are healthier. You see these benefits, especially.
Yeah.
You seem to see this like tangible benefit to going to a religious service in person. and the paper I'm thinking of right now is health outcomes. There's probably others that you do. There's no evidence that you also get. Actually, there's evidence that you don't get that online. And so yes,
Mhm.
yes, to that.
Yeah, so the end goal for me is always going to be moving people towards some sort of in-person embodied faith practice with a group of people somewhere. So that's why to this point I've avoided doing this. Well, let's be honest. One, I have no idea what I'm doing. So that's like I know how to do in-person church. I've planted a church before. I know all of that. So I'm sort of modeling what I've done already in the past, what I already know how to do. But I also have a bias towards like embodied community is this is a necessary part. I don't think you need to go to a room with 200 other people and sing songs together to be a part of an embodied faith community. I don't think that
Sure helps.
it helps. It definitely helps, but the church has functioned for hundreds and hundreds of years and still functions in other places in the world today around dinner tables. So I don't think it's necessary to do that. But and I just talking about like the size, the building, those things help, but they're not necessarily essentials to being a part of a faith community. I think you and 3 or 4 other families that gather once a week and commit yourselves to, um, you know, gospel proclamation with one another and spiritual disciplines and serving your neighbors and practices of rest. I think that would form you greatly as a spiritual person as well. For me, in the way of Jesus.
Well, and to answer Clara your question too, I think it's like, yes, of course it's better to be in person. Just like it's, most companies are finding out it's better for folks to work in person at the office. In general, people do better when they're in community, not when they're out on their own. And so, yeah, like the internet is now a place where a lot of people spend a lot of time. And Christians of many stripes feel called by God to go to places where people feel spend their time and to bring them Christ. And some people call that mission work, some people call that church planting, some people call that evangelism. There's a whole lot of ways that people talk about that. And there's whole varying degrees of skill, talent, and enjoyment of that kind of thing. So like, I mean, yeah, I think calling it church or whatever, maybe you end up like not using that terminology or figure out a way that, what you mean by it or something, but that's certainly not for me to say, but because for a lot of reasons. But I am interested in what Tayo has to say. But I did want to mention that like seems like a masterstroke of Paul's now, but the trap of both content and the like mega church service where you can be anonymous in the pew, the trap of that is the better the content, the more people just come for the content and just want to be anonymous and want to stay in the back. But if you grow slow and if there's a lot of rough edges, that's where people will, and it's as simple as the fact that the Grim Grizz branding does not look professional. So more and more people feel compelled and joy in creating it because there's not some kind of high quality threshold that you have to meet to participate. But yeah, so that, I guess that also kind of sums up what I was talking about earlier with the whole David Platt stuff, was just that like groups, organizations, churches, they have all types of problems. Usually it comes down to people acting immorally, which you can't stop. And so that being said, I do think that Paul's kind of model of growing slow and Grimm's model of kind of keeping the production quality, if your main goal is participation, keeping the production quality and the shininess at a minimum, and really only paying attention to that so far as there's someone within the community who feels called by God to make it better. I think that that's like a good kind of strategy. For
for an online community or for really any type of community. But interested in what Tayo says.
Can I jump in before? Mikmo, are you volunteering to make Redeemer Online better? Because I would welcome that. Right now, I do all of it. And
If you want me to make it better, you're gonna have to pay me some fat stacks. But if I'll make
golly,
it
dude, I don't pay myself fat stacks. Yeah, somebody asked, would I do this even if I wasn't a pastor? And yeah, I don't have to do this. I could go do something else. But I feel like I end up doing this no matter what I do anyway. So that's why here we are. I've tried doing something else. So it ends up just becoming this anyway.
I'm gonna need you to say more about that after Teo talks.
Okay.
Oh no, I wanted to know more about that as well. So go. I'll remember what I've got to say.
I tried doing something else, but it always turns out the same.
I find that because of just my personality, because of my interest, and I like to think I'm sort of I am an idealist, but I'm also a pragmatist. I just care about what works for people. And I've always wanted to help people understand and practice the Christian faith. Before I became a pastor, I worked in a grocery store, like retail, for about 10 years. And even there, my conversations were constantly about like trying to grow understanding and then encouraging practice. Not in like well, you should do this, you should live this way. Probably in my younger years, I was a lot more preachy like that. But like now I just think of it as like, if you're interested in this, let's talk about it. And if you want to practice it, like, hey, experiment, try some things. Tell me how that works for you. How's that going? And when we left our church plant in Michigan to move to Tennessee, so that my wife could take a job at St. Jude Children's Hospital, I thought about, okay, what am I going to do next? Do I look for a different job here? Started interviewing for looking for sales jobs, looking for like marketing type jobs. And then also looking at like nonprofit donor relations type jobs. Those all sort of seemed like natural fits. But everything I look at just doesn't give me the same kind of joy and spark as having those kind of understanding and encouraging practice kind of conversations. I love that. So I think I could go do something else for income, but I don't. I also, my wife and I were just talking about this last night. I'm very lucky that, we would not go hungry if I had zero income. So I do this because I can, and I don't have to go find something different to do.
I had a couple of questions for both Corey and Mikmo. I think I remember from your Q&A with, or Randos with PVK, that this online church is an outgrowth of a COVID online church that some people were able to return to embodied church attendance and others were unable to. Do you have some of the reasons why people were unable or unwilling to return back to embodied church and chose online?
I don't know every single person's story. Some of them, my buddy who was the pastor of that church, his name's Joe, and some of the people who started connecting, I don't know if you'd say like they connected with the church, they connected with Joe, and they connected with the way that he talked about the faith, and they weren't a part of an embodied community anywhere. So they had no interest in becoming a part of an embodied community somewhere. They just had an interest in being connected to Joe and the way that he talked about the faith. And then Joe brought me in and said, hey, can you continue doing this? Because there are people who, for a variety of reasons, whether it's church hurt or just lack of familiarity, or I didn't grow up that way. They just won't walk through the doors of a conventional church, but they will connect with you online. What do you think about doing this? In that sense, it was the outgrowth. Now I know from people like people with disabilities who don't find church accessible that connect with us online. That's part of it. But some of it is like, people have been burned by church and are just not interested in sitting with a group of people who they feel burned them in the past. And it's very, very, that becomes a very big barrier, which I can totally understand. To have to, it's almost, I think it would be malpractice to ask them to go back to the scene of their abuse in a sense, or their pain. Like, I'm not their therapist, and I'm not going to, prescribe exposure therapy to them. So there are some people who like, this is kind of their foray back into, okay, what is this faith for me, and what might it look like in my life? And Redeemer Online is a really great place for people to explore that. Clara, I'm new at this. Am I meant to read that when you put it on screen? Or is that for the audience? Is that for the people who are watching's benefit? Do you control that, or you don't control that?
I love this because I'm new at this too, and I'm experimenting. If you would like, it's sort of like an invitation to like, this is what this is how I'm interpreting this. And I would love to hear others' interpretations. I sort of mean it as like here's someone else who's part of the conversation who doesn't want to talk right now. I don't know how other people mean it. And so like, if you wanted to respond, then that would be sort of inviting that person into conversation. And maybe if you didn't want to respond, they could still be heard and acknowledged in this way. It's sort of my vibe. Just very new.
Okay. That's helpful. That's helpful.
But these are also on I don't know if you can access this. There's a sidebar.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. Yeah. One of the issues, tech troublemakers say, one of the issues with online church is that many treat live streams of worship passively. Online is about forming community, but worship in person is about connecting once you have formed a community. Yes, unless I guess if you're a visitor to that community, you're not really a part of it yet. But there is something, I think this is what I was saying before a little bit too. It's very possible to attend a Sunday morning church service community and still be passive. And just like it's easy to pull up a video and call it church. I think both could function as spiritual formation in your life, but it's about how you actively engage them.
My mind is just spinning because there's so much going on here.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Even Teo, when you said, "Oh, your randos conversation or your Q&A with Paul jumped onto my live stream that I was attempting for literally the first time, and I was trying to sort out how does StreamYard work, and I'm going to go live, and I don't think anybody's going to show up, so I can figure out how this works." And Paul jumps on, and he's like, "All right, why don't I just stream it to my channel too?" And then suddenly the chat's going like faster than I'm able to watch. Clara asked me what kind of ice cream I liked, and it was just a very it was very overwhelming. The whole experience is very, very overwhelming. So we're all just sorting this out together. I wasn't expecting to do a Q&A or I think somebody felt maybe offended that I got bumped up the list for a rando conversation. There's a list I didn't even know. I'm barely I don't know what a rando conversation is. I'm new to
Fear
this.
not, brother. Fear not. I was the one.
Whole thing.
I was the one who insinuated that you had been bumped to the top of the list because you had Van in your name, and it was completely in jest.
Oh, perfect.
Completely in
jest.
That's good.
I get it. That's the Dutch Mafia comment too. Awesome. Cool.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, for your first time, I thought, A+. Good showing.
Oh,
Good
hey,
showing.
thanks. Thank you. Thank you. I think I can become comfortable in this kind of space.
I remember the first time that I was on a conversation and Chad asked me, "Tell me about where you come from," or something like that. And I told him, "Oh, there's Chad. Chad's here." He asked me about my house. where I grew up or something. I told him that there was a driveway and some siding. A little joke we have. Pretty
Yeah.
funny.
Nice.
What you were saying there about I completely lost my you were answering tech troublemaker's question and also Teo's question, but the issues with online worship and live streams. I thought that was a good point. And it seems like a lot of the problems that we have with in-person stuff, a lot of the disconnect in the in-person space is also something. It's like, so it's not like disconnect is new to the online space. It's something I continually hear you say.
Yeah.
I can't help but feel like Corey is trying to provide manna in a wilderness, and that we have basically been like, yes, but is the manna gluten-free?
Well, listen, I'm trying to bake bread. I think that's all. You guys can, and hey, listen, if you look at it, you go, Corey, this bread sucks. I'd be like, all right, I hear that. More salt, less salt. Like I had this conversation offline with Paul the other day, because I'm not familiar with having conversations in front of all kinds of people, and he told me his story a little bit, and I sort of shared with him, hey, I definitely, in the first church plant, there was a vision and then like a sticky note plan to accomplish that vision broken down into goals and tasks and quarterly goals and all of the rest. But I feel like that's not, boy, the vision that I had for Redeemer Online it's feeling a lot more like muddling. I'm going to have to muddle my way through and respond as things come up. And, which mostly means like a lot of people are in the Christian Reformed Church. They put together what do they do? They write these like complaints, the official complaints. What do they call them?
Gravamen?
No, an overture.
Oh, overture. Yeah.
So in the regional body of churches that Redeemer Online is associated with, somebody wrote an overture saying like basically that they wanted to shut us down, because it would confuse people about what church really is, and all these complaints. And then the regional body did not accede to the overture, but the person felt passionate enough, they brought it to Synod, which is why the Christian Reformed Church Synod now has a committee to talk about like, boy, what do we do with digital church and online? And
not a bad synod to have your name come up in terms of nobody remembering.
Right. Absolutely. It was a footnote in the conversation, which like in a lot of ways I'm grateful for, because I would like to, as much as possible, keep my head down. I would as little attention as possible, so that I can keep just trying to do this thing I'm doing and not have too many people try to blow it up before we actually are able to do some good with it.
Do you have like a clear mandate from, say, a elder board or a synod or is it just kind of the more evangelical approach of like your supporters or whatever? Like where?
No, it's so I'm under the authority of a church council called Redeemer Christian Reformed Church in Sarnia. They were very like forward-thinking, experimental, but elderly congregation. However, they sorry, Teo. Oh, my bad, Tayo.
No, you're good. You're good.
I talk too much. So
no, Tayo does that. You're good.
All right. So I'm under their sort of supervision and authority. And they're the church that sort of started Redeemer Online with their pastor. So I still I'm not like a rogue pastor out here doing my own thing without any supervision, and then we'll see what happens. Like,
well, I mean, the reason I asked was because, like you were saying, like it's not like you don't kind of have the normal type of like goals or like quarterly quotas or whatever the type of numbers or whatever that usually some type of church authority is expecting from you. But so it strikes me that you're kind of like Clara in a weird sense in this space. Not only that you're new, but that you're kind of here professionally. you know, like
Sure.
not
Yeah.
here actually, like in this stream, like I'm just thinking of you as Corey, but because we're talking about your online project, it is kind of interesting that it's like you're trying to learn from us, Clara's trying to learn about us, and so there's a weird similarity that you guys had. I'm looking forward to your one-on-one convo.
Yeah, I am trying to learn from what this little corner. I'm still trying to figure out what is this little corner. And in a Paul and my conversation, I said that to him, and he literally went, "That is the question," and then he hung up. That was the end of the conversation.
Yeah, I can give you some context on that. It's a constant. So I call it navel gazing, and there's plenty of puns to be made off of that. But it's just because of actually this connects to what I told Clara earlier that Neil said last night on the Mark's podcast. But it's we're the misfits of the misfits here, and so there's lots of disagreements. And of course, when you've got a lot of misfits, it's really hard to come up with a team name. And so there's much debate to this day over the team name, you know, and so much so that people would rather be on a different team than go by that name, that team name. So it's a very yeah, it's been contentious, but it's also oft returned to as a source of conversation. Like, what's really going on here? What are we about? Who are we? And I'm probably on the grumpier side of getting annoyed with that kind of talk, but I understand now that it's necessary. So I just kind of let the people who need to do that. And I partake in it myself some too. I must say, this whole, what has this whole stream been if me not trying to explain something about the community we're in to Clara? But with that,
I need that, McMo.
Yeah,
I need a McMo in my key informants list and my life.
My wife's tired of hearing me mansplain, so I've had to take it to the internet.
I appreciate it. It's really a service to me. And I am going to quote you as saying that in my paper.
Quote me all up and down. You know, I want somebody at Notre Dame to be like, yeah, Claire's paper was all right, but you really got to check out this McMo character. You know, that's my ultimate goal for your paper.
I want to turn in an interactive paper, you know, with a link to a live stream.
Hyperlinks.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Well, I probably need to go have some lunch and then get back to work. But good chatting, Clara. Well, you're one of the hottest new streams in this little corner.
New stream. What can I say? I learned all my best techniques from McMo.
Keep it up, Claire. You're doing a great job. And same to you, Corey. I haven't checked out any of the Redeemer Online content yet, but I'm sure I will at some point. And so looking forward to engaging with that, hopefully. So see you around.
Cool. Nice to meet you. See ya.
Bye.
Corey, I wanted to mention here, Chad has invited you to a conversation, a randos conversation with him on the Friday Morning Nameless, and to his Not Estuary show, which I think would be really exciting for you. I'm sure you would love it.
Sure. Chad, can you send me an email, Corey@redeemeronline.church?
And Chad is great. I can forward that to him too if he needs it, and I can share your contact information with Chad to make sure he gets it if he's not on right now, if you would like. And there was something else I was going to ask you. Oh, okay. So if Chad, you also need to meet Griswold Grimm, because everybody has to meet Griswold Grimm. I'm sure you've heard.
I have heard his name come up multiple times, and when I've tuned into Paul's like Friday morning video, I have seen this fella show up in the stream. So
okay, so you've been lurking here in this space for a while, Corey.
No. I've probably clicked into his Friday morning stream like twice, and just for very brief moments of like, what is this?
Yeah, I think we all have that experience.
Yeah. So,
well,
I've got a meeting to run to in just a couple minutes.
Me too.
I feel like you and I just scratched the surface of what we want to talk about more. So let's jump on another time.
Yeah, we'll have to reconnect soon. But it's really fun meeting you, Corey. Thank you for meeting me.
Yeah, absolutely. You too, Claire. We'll talk to you later.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.